As we kick off this edition of Around the National, haven't the Chicago Blackhawks become quite the little spoiler? As we remember you talked about them beating the Sens a couple weeks ago after the Sens had won 5 in a row. Now they beat the Preds. A huge opportunity for Nashville to pull closer to the Winnipeg Jets. They were 4 points back. The Jets were up in tough against Boston. They play each other tomorrow, Nashville and Winnipeg, and they can't get it done against the Blackhawks.
And here's the significance of that loss is they win that game, and it didn't matter in regulation, overtime. They get those 2 points, right? That would put them in a position if they would beat Winnipeg in Nashville on Saturday, they would be in the playoff spot.
Yes.
They would be tied in points, but because they have 3 games in hand, they would be the team that would be in the playoff spot. So give a lot of credit to the Nashville Predators and John Hines and that group there, but unfortunately, they might look back at that game, that loss against the Chicago Blackhawks with regret, for sure. And, Bruce, I'm sure I remember last year, I was here on the East Coast, and Jackie remembers I'd be up late night watching. You remember, too, because I would text you at like 3 in the morning Eastern time. And, you were trying to win games, and you were chasing all years. And I think you had a loss to, the Red Wings with, 1-0. And, those are the ones you just, I'm sure if I mention it right now, you think about it right away.
I know exactly the game, and you were talking about. I know that week it was the Buffalo and Ottawa, and we didn't win any of those games. And you kick yourself because you know that they were winnable games. That if you win them, you're going to make the playoffs. And Nashville's in a situation where they're playing very good. And they come into this game, and I don't know, I didn't watch the game, so I don't know if they played good or bad or what have you, but at the end of the day, they're just saying, this is 2 we had to have.
Find a way.
Yeah, find a way.
It's made worse by the fact that the end of the season schedule for the Predators is pretty tough. They have games in hand, but you got to win them. And they've got some tough opponents coming up. Dallas is no easy feat. They got Vegas. They got Carolina, Winnipeg, who's fighting for the team they're fighting with. There's a lot. Colorado, Minnesota. It's not going to be easy. That's 2 points against a bottom-tier team. We just talked about the Blackhawks having a shot at Connor Bedard, right? That's a game you got to win.
Yeah, you got to find a way to get it done. But, the good news is they got the Calgary Flames twice down the stretch, so those are games that, they could.
And how about the win for Calgary last night? I've been calling the Flames Tostitos for a week.
Yeah.
But they win last night. Those 2 teams lose, and suddenly I'm like, well, maybe they're still got a little bit
I was
of life.
calling them that in December, right? I don't like the Flames group, but let's face it, they're there now. And the Winnipeg Jets, it's just so crazy. I was, again, down in Florida. I saw the Jets. They played that crazy game with Florida. They found a way to win the game. They had blown a lead. They win in overtime. The next night, they go into Tampa without Josh Morrissey. I think Lowry was a game-time decision.
Hellebuck back-to-back.
And they go in and they win in Tampa. So, and then now they're back on the other end of it. So this is going to be tooth and nail right to the end of the season, every single game between these teams.
It goes to show you that the NHL players don't tank. They want to win every game.
Yep.
And it goes to show you how talented the league is, how tough the league is, that any team can win on any given night. And you can't say that about all the leagues, I don't think. There's just so much good competition in the NHL, and it's only going to get better.
Let me ask you guys this. Not necessarily which team you think will get in, but which team you think would be the most competitive in a first-round playoff series out of those 3, Calgary, Winnipeg, or Nashville?
To me, it's Calgary. If they get in, I'm saying watch out. Unlike you guys, I've always said that they're going to have a run. I just remember playing against them so much in the last couple of years.
But they were better last year.
They were better, but they still have the same, they got the majority of the same players. But if they get hot, playing in that building of theirs is tough to win in. And no matter what you say, they still they outshoot every team. They outplay every team. They just haven't outscored every team. Right. And if they get into the scoring department, I think down the stretch, isn't it great to be going in hot? Didn't the LA Kings do this at one point last year, a couple of years ago with a good team, and they ended up same coach, by the way, and won the Stanley Cup. So I would fear Calgary more than I'd fear anybody else.
Yeah, I think I might just say Nashville because of UC Soros. he's one of those guys that seems like he can have those games, and you could say the same about Hellebuck.
Yeah, big time.
But it just seems UC Saros is one of those guys that when he gets hot, he gets really hot. So
he does. Juicy UC is no joke.
Yeah, but I mean their schedule, they have all those games, but 1, 2, 3, 4 back-to-backs, which means
and it's the hardest remaining.
Are you going to lean on him in those back-to-backs? Can they go to Lankin in those spots? Can he provide? That's the one thing that Flames have going for him, because Markstrom, it's been a tough year. He's played a little better of late. They also have Vladar. It seems like they have, like when you think about as a second guy, they're a little deeper at goal than those other two teams.
I know one thing, like when you need a goalie to play a lot, my first year in Anaheim, we went 31 or 32 games with Jonas Hiller, but I just never let him practice.
Yeah.
He didn't practice at all. He just played the games. So that's how he tried to keep fresh
as best
I mean, he'd have the morning skate, and that would be it.
By the way, LG weighing in. Don't sleep on Lankin in a national 925 save on the year. Pretty good. So,
but we talked about it. What did we talk about earlier? Big moment.
Yes,
saves.
You're right. You're right.
Can he, in those moments now, as these games really get more important, can he do it? And you know what? Nashville's been a real disappointing team to me this year, because I thought with the addition of Ryan McDonough, they were going to make a push forward this year, and it really has not happened.
They were like a darling in the preseason a little bit as a team that did a lot of really good things for their team.
I'd say these three teams, it's fitting that they're slugging it out with one another at the end, because I think all of them had higher expectations. Winnipeg maybe.
See, I think Winnipeg is the most complete team of the three, just based on the season. Like, they've had the best, like, front-to-back season. So for me, I would like them to be rewarded for that, even though they've had a tough stretch the last couple weeks.
I talked to Randy Moeller, who does the color analyst for the Florida Panthers games down there, and he was, in between periods, he came up to me, we were all talking, and he said, how is this team, like, not one of the best teams in the league? They're big, they're strong, they're fast, they got a really good goalie. And it's like, well, they're just inconsistent, right? And they've had some injury issues this year. Maybe they don't believe enough in that group that they are what someone like Randy from above sees. And Randy only sees them when they play the Florida Panthers, but for the most part. So it's going to be fascinating to watch down the stretch. I'm against you on that one. I don't love Calgary, but
he hasn't liked Calgary all
year. But you know what? They're right there now, and Darryl knows how to. You guys are jockeys. You know how to work your teams down the stretch.
Well, I got to always, back up my former teammate. So
hey, there you go.
There you go.
I'll say this, too, and this is a factor, I think, for the Winnipeg Jets. We talk about, again, if you're just joining us, huge game tomorrow. Winnipeg, Nashville, the Preds are chasing the Jets. They've got games in hand. Pierre-Luc Dubois probably going to miss his 6th straight game tomorrow for the Jets. That's an important piece for them.
Big loss.
So.
Well, you know what? How can you cry about that? How many games has Forsberg lost?
I'm just
forgetting him, Johansson. Who hasn't had a great year, but they're missing some big wheels too.
Everybody's missing somebody.
Well, and the Preds also dealt away a couple of important players for themselves as well, right? Like Matthias Ekholm is not there anymore. Tanner Jeannot is in Tampa. This is a team that, based on the way they approached the deadline, we thought, okay, so Nashville has accepted that, this might not be a year where we are a playoff team, and that's okay. Let's approach the deadline that way. If we make it, that's great. If we don't, we refocus on next year. So we've seen a few teams that have had that sort of approach the deadline as sellers and then win, a lot of games coming out of the deadline.
Yeah, you can see some of them here. I mean, the Vancouver Canucks, they've been playing pretty well since the deadline with some of the moves they made. They added, you add a guy like Hronek on defense, Bruce. I'm sure you would have loved to have him. I mean, he's a legit top 4 defenseman in this league. They only had one top 4 defenseman in Vancouver almost for your entire tenure there. The goalie's been out for Vancouver. He comes back now. The schedule has been a little easier. So good for the Canucks. I mean, they've got some, as you know, way better than us. I mean, Pettersson, Miller. They've got some really high.
They got some great
has had 34 goals this year.
And who would have thought Kuzi would have had, approaching 40 goals.
First year in the NHL.
First year in the NHL, but every game he seems to score. But I will tell you about him. He has got one of the best releases, and he's got vision from the circles in as good as anybody I've seen. And he'll be better next year.
I have another question for you, Bruce, because I feel like every year at this point in the season, we see bad teams or non-playoff teams win games, right? Like the Chicago Blackhawks, right? Like they just beat Nashville. They beat the Sens when they were red hot a couple of weeks ago. Sent them into a tizzy. Now they're out of it. But I guess what I'm trying to get at here, and you could apply this to maybe the Capitals and the Preds as well, because they dealt away pieces and they made it pretty clear that they were sellers and they weren't dead set on making the postseason. Is there something about the end of the year when the pressure's a little bit off, you either know you're not making the playoffs or the front office isn't expecting you to make the playoffs, that changes the mindset and makes a team almost a little more dangerous because they're playing looser, they're not overthinking, the pressure is off, maybe they're trying to prove something? Have you noticed that as a coach?
Well, I think all the things you said. I mean, they're playing for jobs for next year too, which sometimes is the best motivator. And I mean, there is no pressure on them. The other teams do, whether you like it or not, take them lightly in a lot of situations. And they want to prove something to themselves. That's why I said teams don't tank. They want to show that they're not tanking and that they're not playing soft. And no matter who goes into the lineup, especially when the young guys go in the lineup, they usually play harder than anybody. So it makes it difficult. But you've seen it over the years. I think Columbus a few years ago won 10 in a row at the end of the year. And teams have that thing, and then you expect big things from them the next year, and they don't have it at the start of the year. So it's something I've been fortunate in my career so far that haven't been able to be in that position too many times where you're not playing for anything. So it's tough, but I mean it's tough on the coaches because they got to find different ways to motivate these guys every day, and they're obviously doing it in Nashville. And I mean, the Chicago is sort of saying, yeah, you think we're no good, we're going to show you. And they come up against, they beat Boston, they beat Nashville. They've won some big games down the road. So you can't take anybody lightly. I think Arizona's been 6 in a row that they've gotten points in. Vancouver has played very tough against everybody lately. So these teams, they don't give up.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny. I talked to Danny Briere at the GM's meetings. He's the interim GM in Philly now in his first week on the job. And he talked about the idea of, like, you know, the players in the room want to win. The coaches want to win. He goes, and, you know, for us here in Philadelphia this year, we've changed the culture under John Tortorella, and that's been really important. You know, it hasn't necessarily showed in the standings per se, but, you know, when you play the Philadelphia Flyers right now, night after night after night, you're getting a tougher tiger by the tail, so to speak, on a nightly basis. They play hard. Danny's theory is, like, you know, when it comes to this, we have a job to do as executives, too. The players are going to play hard. The picks are going to be what the picks are at the end of the day. It's up to us and our scouting staff to make those picks, to find good players to come into the mix down the road. So there's only going to be one team that ends up with the first pick. Everybody has to try to be competitive and be better on a daily basis. And, you know, the players in the room, and you know it, Bruce. I mean, the coaches, they want to win. And your point about, like, playing for jobs next year, there's always scouts at all these games. Watch it every single night. Maybe you fall out of favor in Anaheim. Maybe somebody picks you up on a better team and says, hey, he was a 2 there in Anaheim. He's not really a 2. He could be really a good 4 for our team, and now you're in a better situation. So players should always be aware. They're always watching.
The scouts didn't end their job on trade deadline.
That's right.
The thing they look at now is character on the teams that aren't winning, because every team wants character players, and they want players that aren't quitting. They want players that are playing as hard now as they did all season long. So, I mean, somebody's watching you, and the minute you let up is the minute that one scout will say that guy's done and knock him off the list. So you got to play hard all the time.